Welcome back to another episode of Inside SFPS. My name is Cody Donarski, Public Information Officer with Santa Fe Public Schools, and today I am joined by a very, very special guest. Today, it is my honor to have on Miss Tara Hughes, who is a teacher here at Nye Early Childhood Center, and she was also named the 2023 New Mexico Teacher of the Year. Thank you for joining me, Miss Tara Hughes.
Hi, thanks, Cody.
I'm so excited for this interview. A little backstory, a little background. I have only known you for like maybe a month or two. The first time we had ever met, I was actually asked to help you shoot one of your videos for the Teacher of the Year. You had no idea kind of where you were. And I think you had known you were a finalist. And I think you and Brittany had reached out to me to help you record your video. That was the first time I ever got to meet you. And then I think after we finished shooting the video, we spent 20 minutes talking about where we grew up because we both kind of come from the Northeast. So it's been really amazing to be a small part of your journey, to have some sort of intersect at some way throughout this journey. So I'm very excited for this interview. To start, so you're not a New Mexico native. You're originally from the Northeast. What part was it again?
I'm from Connecticut.
Connecticut. And so that's where you grew up your whole childhood. When you graduated high school, did you know what you wanted to do?
I didn't. I went into biology. I was a biology major and I wanted to go into the sciences. The labs were really early for an 18-year-old to get up at. So all my labs were at like 8:30 and I was like, I'm not really into that. And so then I went and majored in theater, which is nice. So what was really interesting is I didn't know that my family had a history in theater. My grandfather passed away before I was born, and he was a rig-man and ran backstage theater. And I also had some great uncles, who were in vaudeville. So
it was kind of in your blood.
It was in my blood, and I had no idea. My father did some. He did not go into theater, but that whole backstage was kind of there, and I had no idea. So I learned a lot about my family that way, and then also theater's one of my big passions. So
when you graduated, did you get right into the workforce? Did you have some odd jobs before you kind of broke in? Because I know theater and film can kind of be difficult to break into. My cousin, she graduated from UMass Amherst with a theater degree, so I know how difficult theater can be to get in. So, what was that transition like when you graduated, when you got your degree to getting your first job? What was kind of that like?
So when my undergrad, I did some work for a place called the Downtown Cabaret, and that was in Bridgeport. And the actors were unionized. So I worked backstage. I wasn't unionized, but I ran the stage crew there and I helped produce some shows there. I did lighting. I loved it. And I ran like 4 shows on Saturdays, 1 on Friday nights, and on Sundays. And so I had experience in working professionally in like a small theater. And then from there, I graduated, and the opera had a really well-known apprentice program. So I had friends who had moved out here, and I was like, I'm going to go to New Mexico. I'm going to live in Santa Fe, and I'm going to work for that apprentice program. And I was really lucky to be an apprentice for a summer. And then they hired me as a carpenter and a welder, and I stayed on. And then I worked a few other seasons after that.
Oh, wow. So how old were you when you moved out here?
I was probably 22.
Okay, so you were pretty much fresh out of college.
Yep.
And then, so when you were at the opera, what were kind of the things that you were doing?
So I love the opera, and I love like the grandiose bigness of it, right? It's like huge. It's so massive. And I remember when I first started there, coming from like theater, things are big, but there it's like the walls were like 16 feet tall, and, you had to learn how to like carry them correctly. And you had to learn how to carry them with your hands and put weight against each other. And here's like 2, college students. Like, I wasn't exceptionally strong, but like I learned how to carry huge 16-foot walls, and then you'd have these huge sticks that people would like kind of spot you with. So you had 2 people back and forth, and then people with sticks making sure like, the wind didn't take it, because we all know the wind here in New Mexico, and it's crazy.
Especially with the opera up on the hill.
Yes. So we put sets on We did changeovers where we changed them every night, and then we ran the shows. So it was long days. We worked like 70-hour weeks. It was crazy. You went in the morning, you put a set on, you then took a set off the stage, then you ran the opera, then you had another changeover at night, and sometimes I'd get home at like 4 o'clock in the morning. But it was so exciting. Like I loved it.
You were a night owl?
I was a night owl.
Well, did you have a production that like stands out in your mind that was like, this is like one of my, one that just stands out that you're like, this is the greatest thing that I've worked on?
I really loved Falstaff. It had the best like turntable on the stage, and it rotated, and we had a certain amount of time that we had to like set it up before it rotated back to the audience. And it was like a fun challenge. And I remember like it raining and having to like get that set on the turntable and then having to wipe everything down and being like, we did it, we made it. And then like watching that turntable go and be like, oh, okay, we're all set. The show's going on. So,
that thrill and that anxiety of like, are we going to pull it off? Did we pull it off? We pulled it off. And then you get to see everyone's reaction. And then that the audience is like, how did they do that? Like, it's almost like a magic trick. It is.
I think that's what's so, amazing about theater is that it's really magical and people don't know backstage. And especially at the opera, you always see people come in and they do backstage tours and people are like, wow, like this is the set before it's on that stage. And theater definitely has a magical quality to it that makes it, so unique and such a great collaborative art form. So
that's incredible. You have such a unique backstory and one that we haven't really heard, or I don't think many people that we've had on the podcast so far have had essentially a full career before transitioning into a completely different career. So with that, kind of because obviously we're not doing this interview because you won Carpenter of the Year or, Backstage of the Year with the opera. How did the whole transition from working production in theater to education kind of come for you?
So I was hired on to be work in the shop, and I worked in the shop with 8 guys and me at 7 o'clock in the morning until 5. And I learned so much about like building and welding but what I really loved was the production aspect of it. I loved the excitement of being backstage, and I loved working with the college kids, I realized. And so when I was running the stage crew, I was working with 19 to 22-year-olds and teaching them the ins and outs of theater and how to hold, flats and how to put things on and correct terminology. And so I kind of was like, well, this is really where I want to go. And so I kind of envisioned myself going into teaching theater. And then from there, my husband and I left New Mexico and we moved numerous times. We lived in the Finger Lakes, but we also lived in upstate New York, New Lebanon, New York, which is outside of Albany. And I was hired as an educational assistant. It's pretty rural up there.
Yep.
And it was a self-contained early childhood school. And there were 2 classrooms. It was that little red schoolhouse, with like a river running in front of it.
Truly picturesque. When you get to that part of New York, kind of like that central part of New York, some of those schoolhouses are exactly how you would picture them, like from the movies.
Yeah, it was beautiful. I was like, this is magical. 60 acres, rivers, water, the little town, like there were goats walking in the street one day. We used to take the kids on walks. So I was hired there as an educational assistant, and I fell in love with what I saw happening in early intervention. And I saw a collaborative team working together of educators, therapists, and families. And I saw how educators and therapists supported the families and what difference they made with the students and families. It was some of these families' first hope in seeing like how their children could be successful in school. Mm-hmm. They were 3 to 5-year-olds, and they struggled before in the general education setting. And so then they found this school, and I just saw the light that came with these families being supported by these educators and them watching their children thrive. And so I realized that I think this is what I want to do. I told my husband, I was like, I think I'm going to go into education. I think I'm going to go into special ed. And so we moved back to New Mexico, and I got my master's at Highlands University, and I did it in special education. But I knew that I wanted to do early childhood intervention. And so after I got my master's in special ed, I then sought out NI to teach here. This is where I wanted to be. I knew that from the moment I heard about NI. And I was really fortunate to student teach here. And then I was hired as a teacher, and I haven't left.
And you've been here for how long?
9 years.
9 years. So you came, so that was about what, 2014?
14.
14. Yeah. And so I think what's really special from what I understand about your classes, because I've never been around any of your students, I've never kind of seen your classroom, how it is. I'm lucky enough to have a child in the early childhood center. So I think there's some slight correlations between the two. We are sitting on tiny chairs right now at a tiny table. My knees are currently over the table. But talk a little bit about what goes on in your classroom. And I think what's really unique is kind of the blend of students that you have in your classroom. Talk a little bit about what really makes your classroom special. And I know it's hard for you because you are the teacher, so your classroom is always special, but what really stands out about it?
So this classroom has 10 students with IEPs with individual educational plans, and 10, as they say, typically developing or neurotypical peers. So 10 neurodiverse peers and 10 typical peers. And what's really beautiful about this classroom community is we're all working together. We all share the same experiences. We're learning from the same questions. They all work together to help each other. And the differences that each child has is celebrated. And so if a child might be struggling with, say, communication or social skills, other students work together to support those children in those skills. So we all have differences, and they understand that we all need something different to learn. And that's kind of where we start. Some student might need a chair, some student might need a fidget, and that's okay. Another student might be working on like letter sound correspondence, where another student might be learning how to take turns. And so understanding those differences is what we're doing in this classroom, and supporting students so they have those skills to carry throughout their elementary and secondary education.
I think what's so beautiful from what I've understood about your classroom is that while you do have 10 students who are neurodivergent and then 10 students who are typical, you're not seeing the 10 typical students hanging out in one section and the 10 neurodivergent students hanging out. They blend and they work together, and there is no differences. They are equal in their minds. And as someone who has a 2.5-year-old growing up, it is special for her friend, in my eyes, for her to grow up and be able to look at kids of anything, typical, neurodivergent, IEPs, anything, and view them as the same. And I think that's really why it stands out to me that these kids interact with each other. There is no differences. They're not like, oh, this student has an IEP, so he's not learning at the same level as me. I'm smarter than them. Those thoughts don't cross their heads. It's how can I help my friend, and that's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thank you, Cody. That's exactly what we're doing in here. We're working together and building that community, because really, those are the skills that we need to be successful in life. I mean, these kids are going to go out in life and they need to understand differences. And that's what makes understanding and acceptance. And that's what we all need right now in life, right? Is to understand and accept people. And so I'm hoping I know I'm setting and I'm making that foundation for these kids to be able to go out and collaborate and problem solve and work together.
And I think the story that has been told, and if you can share it, because I don't want to butcher it and I don't want to get it wrong, but about the one student who came in late the one day or something like that, if you can share that story.
Yeah, so I have a little student. His name is Jacobo, and
Beautiful little boy.
beautiful boy. And Jacobo has Down syndrome, and we were all outside on the playground on the sidewalk coming in, and they were running late. And they pulled up, and Mom and Jacobo comes running down, and another student said, "Wait, Jacobo!" And so all the kids turned around and were like, "Jacobo, Jacobo!" And everybody started chanting his name as he came running down, and he joined the line. And then we were like, "Okay, now we can go." And Mom told me later that she cried. She cried when she heard all of his friends chant his name, because it was the first time she felt that he was really included, and that he had these friendships. And that's what we're doing here. We're building those friendships. We're building those bonds that are going to last throughout life, and that then, they're going to move on to different grades in elementary school and go on in life, and to be able to still understand that we're all the same. Mm-hmm. We have differences, but we're all the same, and we need to accept differences.
And that bond can continue many years as they're in the district, because, who knows where they end up in the next 10, 11, 12 years, but it may be another student who was in the class sees Jacobo at Santa Fe High as he's going about his day, and like that bond, that connection will still be there. I even get teary-eyed thinking about that story. And again, without trying to be too redundant on myself, having a child in around this age, and you see how they interact with kids. And, when she was first in the early childhood center, I was asking her teacher, does she have friends? How is she with other kids? She was a pandemic baby. She was born in August of the pandemic. So for the first almost 2 years of her life, I think she maybe interacted with a grand total of a dozen kids. Mm-hmm. And so when she got to school, I was worried, and I didn't know how she was going to interact with kids and stuff like that. So I'm sure for a parent, especially with a parent who has a son with Down syndrome, you never know how kids are going to accept your child and treat them, and how they're going to treat them, because they're viewed as different. So hearing that story, I think, just speaks volumes about the work that you do in this classroom, and that those differences, quote unquote differences, are kind of erased. And if they are, like you mentioned earlier, they're celebrated.
They're celebrated. Thanks.
It makes me happy, and I wish I could just take a little bit of your magic dust that you have and sprinkle it across not only just the district but humanity, because I think that is so needed right now, is just acceptance of fellow man and fellow human. And
kindness, right?
Yeah.
Like just being kind to people.
And the other thing that I think speaks volumes, and if you've seen any of the pictures that have been taken throughout your celebration this last couple of months or whatever, is the energy that you radiate. You always have a big smile on your face. You always have a very warm presence and aura and inviting. And, I think the kids feed off of that. And when we were at the Roundhouse for the acknowledgement, or the what do they call it?
Initiation.
Yeah, the initiation. Yeah. The kids, the minute they saw you, beamed. And I know there were some older kids there who you probably had years ago. And they beamed the minute they saw you. They were waving at you. And, you even stopped your own initiation ceremony to make sure that you said hello to one of your students. And I just think that I can't say anything. I don't know why I'm recording this podcast, because too many times over the last couple of months, you've left me speechless on just how incredible you are, and just seeing the way that the kids respond, especially the kids who are on the IEPs. You can tell it really makes their day when they see you, when they get to interact with you. It's really special to see.
And I mean, there's so much happening in this classroom, like every day and every minute, right? Like everything is so intentional that we do. And those relationships are really the foundation of this classroom, is building those relationships with the students, my relationship with each of them and their relationships with one another, and building that community that we have. So, if we do get upset and things are a hard day, that it's like, it's okay. Like we all have hard days. And the next day we come in and we start over again. And then those, relationships keep going and they keep building. And it's just a fun community, I mean, it's our little classroom community, and it's like a little bit of the big world out there is like in here. And so every day, this is their world. This is where they come, and they're able to be independent, and they can go paint and grab paint if they want. There's clay for them to use. They can go and read in the little reading center on their couch. That's the size of them. And so it's really building this world for them so they can take those skills that they have and go out and, be really strong individuals who can advocate for themselves, advocate for others, and problem solve and be kind to each other.
Absolutely. And I think that I was able to put together a video for you. And we spoke to your current students, some former students, I think a parent or two of students. And that parent really stands out to me. She's a teacher in the district, and she had a son who came through your class. And the words that she had about what you had done to set her son up for success. And I think that's kind of really the important thing, is you're setting these kids up for the future. You're not just here to help them in the here and now. You're here to help them down the road. I think he's in like 4th or 5th or 6th grade or something like that. And he's thriving. And, she attributes a lot of that work to stuff that he did back in this classroom. And I think the longer I am around education, the longer I have a child in early childhood education, the more I start realizing the importance of it. Because I look at my daughter now. She's 2.5. She's been in the early childhood center since August. She can count to 20. She knows her ABCs. She is singing songs at the end of the night. She's telling me about her day. Oh, my friend's this, and oh, this kid did that, and whatever. And she's so excited to talk about her day. Next year, she'll go into the 3Y class, and then she'll go to pre-K. Yes. And so by that point, she will have already had 2 years of, I don't want to call it school. We call it school for her, but I know Dr. Aswara doesn't like it being viewed as school because it's not. They're not sitting there raising their hand and answering questions like that. But she will have been exposed to so much more than she ever would have anywhere else. And I think it's so important. I think early childhood education is becoming more of a forefront of why we need it. And I think, again, looking at your classroom is, a main reason why, seeing how these kids thrive in early childhood education and then how that sets them up for success when they finally get to kindergarten.
Yeah. And I think that early child education has been really misunderstood for a really long time, which is why you see discrepancies like in pay, right? Because it has been misunderstood. And right now, things are really changing in early child education. So the government, stakeholders, they're really realizing the importance of high quality early childhood education programs. And so that's really where the playing field gets leveled, being able to provide all families and all students with equalized opportunities, so we can all kids have the opportunity to flourish and go into elementary schools with those skills. I mean, you don't just go into school and know what to do. You know, it's learned. Kids learn. And I've mentioned this story before on the podcast, but Deputy Superintendent Romero, when she was a kindergarten teacher at Salazar, if I'm butchering that, I'm sorry, Vanessa. I think she normally taught 1st or 2nd grade. And this year, whatever year it was, she was doing kindergarten. And she was lining the kids up to go outside or go to lunch or something, and the kids weren't lining up. She was very confused. And so she went to now Principal Georgia Baca, who was a fellow kindergarten teacher at the time, and was like, what do I do? The kids aren't lining up. And Georgia's like, you have to teach them how to line up. And
it's those things that you almost take for granted. You're like, oh, kids know how to line up. No, they don't. But I look at the early childhood center. Those kids get in a line. They walk in a line to the lunchroom. They sit down. They eat their meal. They throw their food out. They empty their trays. They dump out their milk. They put it away. Those skills are invaluable. And while they seem simple to adults, those are huge milestones for kids. And I think too often early childhood education gets viewed as daycare, glorified daycare, but it's not. These kids, especially the kids that are in Santa Fe public schools, are learning. And it's not textbooks. It's skills.
It's inquiry, and it's inquiry-based, exploratory, hands-on learning. So they're learning skills that they're going to use in elementary and secondary. They're already going to have those skills, so then they're going to be able to get the academics that they need. But yeah, I mean, what we're doing is, questioning and social skills and teaching play and how to, work with one another and cooperate, all those skills that kids need to then go work in small groups in kindergarten. So they're all set, right, with all of these skills, and they're going to go into kindergarten and, rock it and be ready to, tackle those academics. And we learn through play. And because we learn through play and because that's so important, early child education can be misunderstood. But what we do as early child education teachers is really intentional. Every play that happens in my classroom is intentional. I set up questions, how can you manipulate the clay? What pieces can you put together to create? So everything is guided with a question. So it, makes them think more and provides that inquiry. And then even when we go into our learning centers, we talk about ways that we can problem solve solutions before it happens. So if someone's having a hard time taking a turn, like what can we do so we can all play together? Do we need to trade? Do we need to take turns? Do we need to ask nicely? Things like that. And so all those skills are being built on. And that's, what they're going to use when they get to kindergarten.
Yeah. They're not necessarily the hard skills of like, can you build a set? Can you weld? Can you fix a toilet? It's, can you share? Do you know how to wait your turn? Maybe some of those soft personal skills that, might not be at the forefront because it's like, oh, can my kid draw? Can my kid write their name? It's, can they cooperate? Are they good with others? Do they know how to take turns? Things like that.
And all those skills, all that turn taking, I mean, that makes us successful, right? I mean, as you grow up into an adult and you're going into the workforce, you have to be able to work with one another. You have to be able to wait and listen to one another. You have to be able to hear somebody else's point of view and understand their point of view. So that's what, we're working on now.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
Before I get to my final two questions,
okay,
I just have to ask you, what is the story behind the hat?
Oh, my dino hat?
Yes.
Oh, it's so fun. So we were doing dinosaurs, and it's like right there in the closet over there, and I have it. And so when I taught a smaller, highly structured classroom, one way that I engaged children was to wear hats and through puppets, right? That's how the kids are. They're like, oh, it's a show going on. This is so great. And it's so fun because I get to use my theater background.
Who would have thought those two would have crossed theater and early childhood education?
Yeah, especially when we went virtual. I was like, oh, I have my own background with my virtual green screen here. Like, this is amazing. Yes. So I was wearing the dinosaur hat to read a book, and my kids loved it. And so then I was just wearing it. They were like, put your dino hat on, put your dino hat on. And so I was just wearing it around the day and reading books in it. And we would doing the T-Rex dance. And we were walking around like Tyrannosaurus Rexes, and I had the hat on. And so then we went virtual, and I was wearing the hat on when we were virtually doing it, and parents loved it and the kids loved it. And so it's a really good hat.
It's funny that you bring that up, because now that you say that, I think I remember during the pandemic, I was posting videos of what our teachers were doing to help keep kids engaged. And I think I remember now that it's like coming back to my head, were you like sitting in a chair, like on a green screen?
Yeah.
Like, yes.
With a hat on my head.
Yes. Okay. This makes total sense. Oh, wow. This is coming like full circle, like almost 3 years now.
Yep.
That's funny. So you were going to be my first guest that I introduced this new kind of segment. I call it a segment, but it's really just a simple question. From a game called We Are Not Strangers. And this is a game, it's got cards, and they ask personal questions, but some of them seem a little more high level. Some of them are kind of just scratching the surface, but they can really kind of dig deep. So I'm excited. The question that I've pulled for today is, what have the past few weeks taught you?
So they really taught me to be confident in myself, and that not to double question myself, and that I am not just a teacher, that I am an educator, and that I am shaping lives and supporting kids and changing the world one student at a time. And sometimes as a teacher, I feel like I hear teachers say all the time, "Oh, I'm just a teacher," or "I just teach math." And that, I feel like we need to throw away that word "just," because we're not just teachers. We're world changers. We're impacting kids every day and sending them out to then change the world. So that's really what I've been working on. And also just having the confidence in myself as being a educator who knows the development of children and can support other educators.
That's really beautiful.
Thanks.
Yes. And my last question for you, the question that I've asked all of my guests to end the episode: what is the best piece of advice that you have received from a teacher? And maybe not even a school teacher, maybe even like a mentor when you were working on set or something like that.
So the best advice that I ever got was from a fellow colleague who worked at NIE. And she said to me, "Just give them time. They need time." And that really impacted me, because I realized that we're always rushing kids, right? And they have to go on our time. We're always like, "Okay, you got to do this. Let's go. We have to go here. We have to go here. You have to get up. You have to do this.
This unit ends at the end of the week. We got to move on to the next thing."
Yeah. Like, I need you to do this. And sometimes we just need to give them time to slow down, to complete what they're doing, and not rush them. And this was told to me, and I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah, like sometimes I just need to be in the moment. So it was like 2 lessons: give them time, and for me to really slow down and to give them time so I'm in the moment with kids and I can actually listen. Because sometimes as an educator, we're going and we're moving and we're not necessarily listening. And that advice made me stop, give those children time, and then listen to them, which is so important, right? Because we all just want to be heard. And so that changed the way I do transitions, the way I structure my classroom, and the way I manage my classroom, was to be able to say, "Okay, you need time. If you're mad, you need time. You're not ready yet." And, I was able to listen to them.